What happens when a 79-year-old ground crew worker gets mocked by a fighter pilot, and that fighter pilot discovers he's standing in front of a living legend? Subscribe to witness the moment. An old man in a maintenance uniform silenced an entire airbase. This is Colonel Marcus Webb, age 79. A faded maintenance jacket and 60 years of memories locked inside cockpits. No one flies anymore. And the day he learned that some people mistake silence for weakness. "Hey, old-timer." The voice cut across the hot Nevada tarmac like a blade. "You missed a spot on the windshield." Captain Derek Hayes stood beside his F-15 Strike Eagle, helmet under one arm, pointing at the canopy with a smirk. He was 29, fresh off a tour in the Middle East, and carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd never failed at anything important. Marcus Webb looked up from where he knelt beside the landing gear, checking tire pressure. His weathered hands, scarred from decades of work, gripped the pressure gauge steady. He was thin, his maintenance coveralls hanging loose on a frame that had once been broader, but his pale blue eyes were sharp, missing nothing. "I'll get to it, sir," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the patience of someone who'd learned long ago that some battles weren't worth fighting. Derek laughed and turned to his wingman, Lieutenant Josh Carter, who was doing his own pre-flight check nearby. "Can you believe they let these guys work on million-dollar aircraft? My grandfather's younger than this dude." Carter glanced over, uncomfortable, but not willing to contradict his flight lead. He offered a weak smile and returned to his checklist. Marcus stood slowly, his knees protesting, and walked to the maintenance cart for a clean rag. Nellis Air Force Base in the summer was merciless. 120 degrees on the tarmac, heat waves shimmering off the concrete like water. He'd worked here for 3 years since moving to Las Vegas after his wife Eleanor passed. The job was simple: ground crew support, pre-flight inspections, cleaning aircraft. It kept him close to the one thing he'd loved his entire life: flying. Most of the younger airmen treated him with polite indifference. Some, like Derek Hayes, treated him like furniture. Marcus climbed the ladder beside the F-15 and began wiping the canopy with careful, precise strokes. Derek stood below, arms crossed, watching with theatrical impatience. "You know," Derek said, loud enough for others nearby to hear, "when I retire, I'm going fishing, not playing janitor at an airbase. No offense." "None taken, sir," Marcus replied without looking down.
What'd you do before this? Military?
"Air Force." Derek's eyebrows went up in mock surprise. "No kidding. What was your job? Mechanic? Supply? Pilot?" Derek laughed outright. "A pilot? What'd you fly? Cargo planes? Tankers?" Marcus paused his cleaning for just a moment, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. Then he continued wiping the canopy. "Fighters." "Sure you did, Pops." Derek turned to Carter. "Everybody who ever wore a uniform thinks they flew fighters. Next he'll tell me he was an ace." Marcus climbed down the ladder, folded the rag, and returned it to the cart. He picked up his clipboard and walked toward the next aircraft on his checklist, without another word. Derek watched him go, shaking his head with amusement. These old guys, man, living in fantasy land. What Derek Hayes didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Marcus Webb had more flight hours in fighter aircraft than everyone on that flight line combined. He'd flown 127 combat missions in Vietnam, tested experimental aircraft that killed other pilots, and earned a Distinguished Flying Cross for a mission so classified it still didn't exist in official records. But Marcus had stopped correcting people years ago. Let them think what they wanted. The medals were in a box in his closet. The memories were enough. That afternoon, as the sun beat down relentlessly, Marcus sat in the break room eating a sandwich. The TV on the wall showed news footage of modern fighter jets, sleek and deadly. He watched with the quiet appreciation of someone who understood what he was seeing. Not just the aircraft, but the physics, the engineering, the split-second decisions pilots had to make. A young airman, maybe 20, sat down across from him. "Mr. Webb, can I ask you something?" Marcus looked up. "Sure." Captain Hayes said, "You used to fly. Is that true?" Marcus took a bite of his sandwich, chewing slowly. "Long time ago. What'd you fly? F-4 Phantom. Mostly. The kid's eyes widened. No way. Those are legendary. My grandfather worked on them. Marcus smiled faintly. Good aircraft. Reliable. Were you in combat? Marcus set his sandwich down, looking at the young man's eager face. He saw himself at that age, full of questions, hungry for stories, believing that war was something noble and simple. Yes, Marcus said quietly. Vietnam. That's incredible. You should tell Captain Hayes. He loves hearing about. It's fine, son. Marcus interrupted gently. Captain Hayes has his own stories. He doesn't need mine. The young airman nodded, though he looked disappointed. He thanked Marcus and left. Marcus finished his sandwich alone, watching the jets take off in the distance, their afterburners painting streaks of fire across the desert sky. Somewhere deep inside, a small part of him still felt the pull, the G-forces, the speed, the pure freedom of flight. But those days were behind him now, or so he thought. 3 days later, the alarm on Marcus's phone went off at 0445. He dressed in the dark, made instant coffee, and drove his old pickup truck to Nellis through the pre-dawn Nevada desert. The base was already bustling. Fighter jets don't sleep, and neither do the people who maintain them. Marcus clocked in and received his assignment. Hangar 7. Special detail. An F-4 Phantom was being prepared for a heritage flight demonstration. A rare opportunity to see the legendary Vietnam-era fighter fly alongside modern jets. The aircraft had been in storage for years and needed a full pre-flight inspection. When Marcus entered Hangar 7, he stopped cold. There she was, an F-4 Phantom II, tail number 637445, sitting under bright lights like a museum piece brought back to life. The distinctive nose, the tandem cockpit, the powerful twin engines. It all came flooding back. Marcus approached slowly, his hand reaching out to touch the cold metal. His fingers traced the panel lines, remembering every system, every quirk, every secret this aircraft held. Beautiful, isn't she? Marcus turned to see a senior maintenance chief, Master Sergeant Linda Torres, standing nearby with a clipboard. Yes, ma'am, Marcus said quietly. You're Webb, right? Ground crew? Yes, ma'am. Torres handed him the clipboard. Pre-flight inspection. By the book. The pilots arrive in 2 hours for the final briefing. Think you can handle it? Marcus took the clipboard, his eyes scanning the checklist. It was basic stuff. Any mechanic could do it. But this aircraft, this wasn't just any aircraft. Yes, ma'am, I can handle it. For the next 90 minutes, Marcus worked with a focus he hadn't felt in years. He checked every system, every connection, every control surface. His hands moved with muscle memory, finding problems the checklist didn't even mention. A loose panel here, a hydraulic line showing wear there. He made notes, made corrections, worked like he was preparing his own bird for combat. When the pilots arrived, Marcus was finishing up. He recognized the voice before he saw the face. Is she ready? Or what? We're on a tight schedule. Captain Derek Hayes strode into the hangar in his flight suit, helmet bag over his shoulder, flanked by Lieutenant Carter and 2 other pilots. Behind them walked a civilian photographer and a public affairs officer. Master Sergeant Torres stepped forward. Sir, pre-flight is complete. Mr. Webb just finished. Derek glanced at Marcus, recognition flickering across his face. Oh, great, the old guy. Did you at least remember where you put the keys? The other pilots chuckled. Marcus said nothing, handing the clipboard to Torres. Any issues? Torres asked. A few minor corrections, Marcus said. She's ready to fly. Derek walked around the aircraft, running his hand along the fuselage with exaggerated appreciation. Man, these old birds are something else. My dad used to tell me stories about the Phantom. Said it was a beast, fast, loud, but handled like a truck. Depends on the pilot, Marcus said quietly. Derek turned, eyebrows raised. Excuse me? I said it depends on the pilot, sir. In the right hands, the F-4 could outmaneuver anything. Derek laughed. Right. And you'd know that how? Marcus met his eyes but said nothing. Torres cut in. Sir, the briefing room is ready. The Heritage Flight Coordinator is waiting. Derek nodded and started toward the exit, but paused. He turned back to Marcus with a smirk. Hey, old-timer, you ever actually fly in one of these? Or just work on them? Marcus's jaw tightened. Both, sir. Both, Derek repeated, drawing out the word mockingly. So what? You sat in the back seat once during a test flight. Front seat, Marcus said evenly. Left side. That was the pilot's seat. Derek's smile faltered for a second, then returned. Sure you did. He turned and walked away, laughing with his fellow pilots. Torres watched them go, then looked at Marcus. You okay? Fine, ma'am. She studied him for a moment, something calculating in her eyes. Webb, did you really fly Phantoms? Marcus picked up his toolbox.
Long time ago, ma'am?
How long? 1967 to 1973. Torres blinked. Vietnam? Yes, ma'am. She opened her mouth to say something else, but Marcus was already walking toward the exit. He had work to do, and dwelling on the past wouldn't get it done. 2 hours later, Marcus was across the flight line, checking hydraulic fluid on an F-16 when he heard the commotion. Voices on radios, people running, a maintenance truck speeding toward Hangar 7. Something was wrong with the Phantom. Marcus dropped what he was doing and jogged toward the hangar, as fast as his 79-year-old legs could carry him. When he arrived, a crowd had gathered around the aircraft. Captain Hayes stood beside the cockpit, frustration clear on his face. 3 maintenance technicians were huddled around an open panel, arguing. What's the problem? Torres demanded, arriving seconds after Marcus. Hydraulic pressure anomaly, one of the techs said. System showing red. We can't clear it. Can we fix it? Not in time for the flight. We'd have to trace the entire system. Could take days. Hayes punched the side of the aircraft in frustration. This is a PR disaster. We've got VIPs flying in to see this. The Heritage flight is supposed to be the highlight of the air show. Torres turned to her team. Get the tech manuals, now. They scattered. Marcus stood at the edge of the crowd listening. He'd already guessed what the problem was. The F-4's hydraulic system was notoriously complex, and this particular issue had a known workaround that wasn't in any manual because it required hands-on experience. He started to step forward, then stopped. Why bother? They wouldn't listen to him anyway. But then he thought about that aircraft. A piece of history, a machine that had saved lives, that deserved better than to sit grounded because of bureaucracy and pride. Marcus stepped through the crowd. Excuse me, Master Sergeant Torres? She turned, clearly stressed. Not now, Webb. Ma'am, I know what's wrong. Everyone stopped. Derek Hayes looked at him like he'd just sprouted wings. You know? Torres asked skeptically. Yes, ma'am. It's the secondary pressure valve on the port hydraulic line. It sticks in cold weather, but this is the opposite, too hot. The system's compensating, but the sensor thinks it's failing. You need to bypass the sensor and manually check the valve. It's not actually failing. Torres stared at him. How do you know that? Marcus looked at the Phantom, then back at her. Because I've fixed it before. Many times. Derek stepped forward. Oh, come on. This guy's making it up. He's... Shut up, Hayes. Torres snapped. She looked at Marcus. Can you show us? Yes, ma'am. Within 30 minutes, Marcus had guided the technicians through the fix. He didn't touch the aircraft himself. That wasn't his job anymore. But he told them exactly where to look, what to check, how to verify, and he was right. The hydraulic system went green. The crowd stood in stunned silence as the techs confirmed it. Torres looked at Marcus with new eyes. How did you know that? Before Marcus could answer, a voice called out from the hangar entrance. Because he probably wrote the manual. Everyone turned. Walking across the hangar floor was a woman in her late 50s wearing the uniform of a 2-star general. Major General Patricia Vance, commander of the 57th Wing. Everyone snapped to attention. Ma'am! General Vance walked straight to Marcus Webb. She studied him for a long moment, then extended her hand. Colonel Webb, she said quietly. It's an honor, sir. Captain Derek Hayes felt the blood drain from his face. The hangar had gone completely silent. Every person there, pilots, technicians, ground crew, stood frozen, trying to process what they just heard. Colonel Webb. General Vance kept her hand extended, waiting. Marcus, after a long moment, shook it firmly. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his eyes held something unreadable. "General," he said simply. "I didn't know you were working here, sir," Vance said. "If I'd known, I would have—" "It's fine, ma'am," Marcus interrupted gently. "I prefer it this way." Master Sergeant Torres found her voice. "Ma'am, I don't understand. Colonel Webb?" Vance turned to face the assembled group, her expression shifting to something between pride and reproach. "This man is Colonel Marcus Webb, retired. He flew 127 combat missions over North Vietnam in the F-4 Phantom. He was a test pilot at Edwards Air Force Base for 10 years, where he flew experimental aircraft that killed 3 other pilots. He survived 4 ejections, 2 aircraft shot down, and 1 mid-air collision." She paused, letting that sink in. Derek Hayes looked like he might be sick. "Colonel Webb," Vance continued, "was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Silver Star, 3 Distinguished Flying Crosses, and the Air Medal with 12 oak leaf clusters. He was one of the finest pilots of his generation." Tori stared at Marcus in shock. The young technicians looked at him like they were seeing him for the first time. Vance wasn't finished. In 1972, Colonel Webb flew a classified rescue mission into North Vietnam to extract a downed pilot behind enemy lines. He flew solo, at night, without support, through the heaviest air defenses in the world. He found the pilot, landed his Phantom on a road, picked him up, and flew them both home. That mission is still classified, but the pilot he saved went on to become a 3-star general. She let the silence hold for a moment. "That general was my father." Marcus closed his eyes briefly, as if this was exactly what he'd been hoping to avoid. Derek Hayes stepped forward, his face pale. "Sir, I didn't know. I'm so sorry. Marcus held up a hand. "Captain, you didn't know because I never told you. You treated me the way you saw me. There's no shame in that, but I was disrespectful." "You were young," Marcus said quietly. "I was young once too. Made my share of mistakes." He looked at Derek with those sharp blue eyes. "The question isn't whether you made a mistake. It's what you do now." General Vance stepped forward. "Colonel Webb, would you be willing to fly the Heritage flight? The Phantom's ready, and frankly, there's no one more qualified." The hangar erupted in murmurs. Marcus shook his head. "Ma'am, I appreciate the offer, but I'm 79 years old. I haven't flown in 15 years. My medical cert can be waived by me," Vance interrupted. "You passed the civilian medical exam for your driver's license, correct?" "Yes, ma'am, but—" "Then you're fit enough. Colonel Webb, please. That aircraft deserves to be flown by someone who understands her. And these young pilots," she glanced at Derek and the others, "deserve to see what real flying looks like." Marcus looked at the Phantom. His Phantom, tail number 63-7445. He'd flown this exact aircraft in 1971. He'd taken her through a dogfight over Hanoi and brought her home with half a wing shot off. "Sir," it was Derek Hayes, stepping forward hesitantly. "Sir, I'd be honored to fly as your wingman, if you'll have me." Marcus studied the young captain. He saw himself at that age, cocky, brilliant, untested in the ways that really mattered. "All right," Marcus said finally, "but we do it my way." Over the next 3 hours, Marcus transformed. The quiet old man in maintenance coveralls became Colonel Marcus Webb, fighter pilot. He gave a briefing that left the younger pilots taking notes. He walked them through the flight plan, the communication protocols, the hand signals. He spoke about the Phantom's quirks, her strengths, her limits. When he climbed into the cockpit, something remarkable happened. His movements were fluid, confident, precise. His hands found every switch and control by instinct. The technicians watched in awe as he went through the pre-flight checklist from memory, a checklist he hadn't seen in 15 years. "Ground, this is Phantom 445. Marcus's voice came over the radio, crisp and professional. "Ready for taxi. Phantom 445. You are cleared to taxi to runway 21. "Sir," It's an honor to have you flying today. Copy that. Thank you. Marcus taxied the Phantom to the runway, Derek Hayes and his F-15 following. The Heritage flight was about to begin. In the tower, General Vance stood watching with Master Sergeant Torres. "How long has he been working here?" Vance asked. 3 years, ma'am. We had no idea." Vance shook her head. "That's Marcus. He spent his whole life trying to disappear, but some men are too big to hide." On the runway, Marcus advanced the throttles. The twin engines of the F-4 Phantom roared to life, shaking the aircraft with raw power. He released the brakes, and the Phantom surged forward, accelerating down the runway. And then, like a bird that had never forgotten how to fly, Marcus Webb pulled back on the stick, and the Phantom leapt into the Nevada sky. The F-4 Phantom climbed steeply, her twin engines screaming, trailing black smoke, a signature of her generation. In the cockpit, Marcus felt 70 years fall away. The stick in his hand, the instruments before him, the G-forces pressing him into the seat. It all came back instantly, perfectly. "Phantom 445, you are cleared for the Heritage flight demonstration. Tower sends their regards, sir." Marcus smiled. "Copy that, Tower. Feels good to be home." Behind him, Derek Hayes and his F-15 struggled to keep up with the climbing Phantom. He'd underestimated the old jet's power, just as he'd underestimated the old man flying her. "Viper 1, you're falling behind," Marcus said calmly over the radio. Derek pushed his throttles forward. "Copy, Phantom. I'm adjusting." The Heritage flight demonstration was supposed to be a simple flyby, both aircraft in formation, a tribute to past and present. But Marcus had other ideas. "Viper 1, let's give them something to remember. You up for it?" Derek hesitated. "Sir, the flight plan. Captain, I wrote flight plans before you were born. Trust me." There was a pause. Then Derek's voice came back, sharper now, engaged. "Yes, sir. I'm with you." "Good. Follow my lead." What happened next would be talked about at Nellis Air Force Base for years. Marcus rolled the Phantom inverted and pulled into a split S, diving toward the runway. The massive fighter, outdated by modern standards, moved with a grace that defied her age. He pulled up barely 200 feet above the deck. Afterburners lit, creating a thunder that shook windows across the base. Derek followed, his modern F-15 effortlessly matching the maneuver. But Marcus wasn't done. The Phantom climbed vertically, almost straight up, defying physics. At the peak, Marcus executed a hammerhead turn, a maneuver that required perfect timing and complete understanding of your aircraft's limits. The Phantom pivoted on her tail and dove back toward Earth. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered in the tower. General Vance watched with her arms crossed, a smile on her face. "That's the Marcus Webb I remember." On the ground, maintenance crews had stopped working. Pilots had come out of buildings. Everyone stood watching the impossible. A 79-year-old man flying a 50-year-old fighter jet like he was 25 again. Derek Hayes, in his state-of-the-art F-15, was beginning to understand something. Technology was impressive, but experience, instinct, the kind of flying that lived in your bones, that was something else entirely. "Viper 1, form up on my wing." Loose deuce formation. Derek moved into position, 50 feet off the Phantom's right wing. They flew in perfect synchronization, old and new, past and present, experience and youth. Tower, Phantom 445. Request permission for one final maneuver. Phantom 445. You are cleared. The sky is yours, sir. Marcus pulled the Phantom into a climbing barrel roll, the aircraft rotating around an invisible axis while maintaining forward momentum. It was a difficult maneuver, one that required absolute precision. Derek followed in the F-15, matching him move for move, and in that moment, something changed. He wasn't just flying with an old man. He was flying with a master. When they landed, the entire base was waiting. Marcus taxied the Phantom to her spot and shut down the engines. The silence that followed the engine shutdown was profound. He climbed out of the cockpit slowly, his legs stiff from the flight, his body reminding him that he was, in fact, 79 years old. But his eyes were alive in a way they hadn't been in years. Derek landed his F-15 and ran across the tarmac. He stopped in front of Marcus and snapped to attention, rendering the sharpest salute of his career. "Sir, that was the most incredible flying I've ever seen." Marcus returned the salute, then extended his hand. "You did good up there, Captain. You've got skill. Just needed to remember that the aircraft is only as good as the pilot." Derek shook his hand, overwhelmed. "Sir, I owe you an apology. What I said, how I treated you, is in the past," Marcus said firmly. "But I'll accept that apology if you learn something from it." "I will, sir. I promise." General Vance approached, followed by what seemed like half the base. "Colonel Webb, that was extraordinary. I'd like to organize a proper ceremony, if you'll allow it. You deserve recognition." Marcus shook his head. "Ma'am, I appreciate it, but I'm fine with things as they are." "I'm not," Vance said. "Sir, you've been working ground crew for 3 years. Every young pilot on this base should know who you are and what you've done." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Derek Hayes, at the young pilots gathered around, at the faces watching him with new respect. "All right," he said finally, "but keep it small." The ceremony took place 1 week later, on a cloudless Saturday morning. The parade ground at Nellis was filled with active duty personnel, veterans, and families. A small stage had been set up with a microphone and the American flag. Marcus sat in the front row, wearing his old Air Force dress uniform, cleaned and pressed by Master Sergeant Torres herself. The ribbons on his chest told a story most people couldn't read. Medals for valor, for service, for sacrifice. General Vance stood at the microphone. "Today we honor a man who has spent his life serving in silence. Colonel Marcus Webb flew 127 combat missions in Vietnam. He tested aircraft that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. He saved lives, both in combat and through his skill as an instructor." She paused, looking at Marcus. "But what makes Colonel Webb truly exceptional isn't just what he did then. It's what he's done since. For 3 years he's worked on this base in a maintenance capacity, asking for no recognition, seeking no glory. He let younger men and women believe he was just another employee. He could have walked onto this base and demanded respect. Instead, he earned it quietly, day by day through his work." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. "This is what true humility looks like," Vance continued. "Colonel Webb, would you join me, please?" Marcus stood and walked to the stage, his steps measured. When he reached the microphone, Vance stepped aside. Marcus looked out at the crowd. He saw Derek Hayes in the front row, sitting at attention. He saw Torres and her maintenance team. He saw young pilots who'd looked at him like furniture just days ago. "I'm not much for speeches," Marcus began, his voice carrying across the parade ground. "But General Vance asked me to say a few words. So here they are." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "When I started working here, nobody knew who I was. And that was fine with me. I didn't need them to know. I was here because I love aviation, and I wanted to be useful. But something happened recently that reminded me why stories matter." He looked directly at Derek Hayes. "A young pilot treated me like I was nobody, and I let him, because honestly, I thought it didn't matter. But I was wrong. It did matter. Not because my ego was hurt, but because he missed an opportunity to learn." Marcus's voice grew stronger. "Every person you meet has a story. Every person has fought battles you know nothing about. The janitor you ignore might be a veteran. The maintenance worker might have saved lives. The quiet old man might have flown missions that are still classified." He let that sink in. "I'm not asking you to give everyone a medal. I'm asking you to give everyone respect. Because you never know who you're standing next to." The crowd erupted in applause. Marcus stepped back, uncomfortable with the attention, but understanding its necessity. Vance returned to the microphone. "Colonel Webb has agreed to serve as a special advisor to our Heritage Flight program. He'll also be conducting seminars on flight tactics and aircraft systems. Gentlemen and ladies, you're about to learn from one of the best." After the ceremony, Derek Hayes approached Marcus. "Sir, I wanted to thank you for the lesson and for the second chance. You're welcome, Captain. Just remember it. I will, sir. Derek hesitated. Sir, would you be willing to fly with me again? Not for a demonstration, just to teach me. Marcus smiled. I'd like that. Over the following months, Marcus became a fixture at Nellis, but in a different capacity. Young pilots sought him out for advice. He gave lectures on tactics, on surviving when systems fail, on the mental game of flying. He taught them that technology was a tool, but judgment was everything. Derek Hayes became his most dedicated student. The cocky pilot transformed into a thoughtful leader, someone who looked beyond the surface, who understood that experience had value no manual could teach. One afternoon, Marcus and Derek sat in the same hangar where they'd first clashed, watching a new group of pilots prepare for training flights. Sir, can I ask you something? Derek said. Go ahead. Why didn't you ever tell anyone? All those years, all that experience, you just let it sit there, unused. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Because I'd already had my turn. I thought the next generation needed to find their own way without old men like me getting in the way. But you have so much to teach. Maybe, but I had to be ready to teach. And they had to be ready to learn. Timing matters. He looked at Derek. You weren't ready to learn from me until you made a mistake. I wasn't ready to teach until I remembered why it mattered. Derek nodded slowly. Thank you, sir, for everything. Marcus stood, feeling every year of his age, but also feeling something else, purpose. Come on, Captain. Let's go look at that aircraft. Something's not quite right with the port engine. I could hear it during the run-up. Derek followed, amazed. You could hear that from here? 40 years of listening to engines, son. You develop an ear for it. They walked across the hangar floor together, the old colonel and the young captain, experience and youth, past and present. Around them, the airbase hummed with life, with purpose, with the constant thunder of aircraft taking to the sky. Marcus Webb had spent years trying to disappear, but in the end, he'd learned something important. Some legacies are too valuable to keep silent. Some stories deserve to be told. And some men, no matter how much they try to fade into the background, cast shadows too long to hide. If this story moved you, remember that respect costs nothing but means everything. The person beside you might be carrying stories that would take your breath away. Listen more, judge less. Honor those who served in whatever capacity they choose to serve now. Subscribe for more stories of quiet heroes who deserve to be remembered.